The evil Skeletor gets showcased in 6 scale. Here's your look at the Mondo Masters of the Universe, the 1/6 scale collectible figure of Skeletor. You must possess all or possess nothing. Mondo is proud to bring to you their second in their Masters of the Universe 1/6 scale figure line, Skeletor. Featuring over 30 points of articulation, reversible fabric cape, and a lot of accessories, Skeletor is the most evil figure this side of Snake Mountain. First thing we're going to do, cats and kitties, is we're going to figure out how tall the Mondo Masters of the Universe Skeletor stands. While I'm also doing this, I'd like to send out a big thank you to the folks over at Mondo, who were very nice enough to send this sample my way. You can currently find this over on Mondo's website. I'll provide the link down below. Starting this review, as we always start these reviews, the standing height of Skeletor, a lot of S's there, stands at 12 inches exactly. And that in centimeters works out to be 30.5 centimeters tall. For those people that favor their measurements in centimeters, 30.5 presented in front of you. Standing in front of you is Skeletor's display stand that comes included with the figure. The stand is rather quite small, and as you can see, it doesn't take up too much the footprint of the figure. It's just enough that the figure can stand on it, but they don't really allow for much clearance past that point, other than maybe just put him in museum poses. That's as much that you can accommodate with the stand being this size. The interesting thing about it, though, is that it's really decoed on the underside, really a section that you're not going to see on the figure stand itself. It attaches in place when you get this out of the packaging. It comes in 2 pieces. You've got the main adjustable neck with the cradle to support the figure, and then you've got a little slotted piece right there that's going to fit into place. It could be any bit easier than that. Again, I'm curious as to why so much detailing is done on the underside of the base, and yet the top of the base, in which the figure is going to be perched atop of, keeps rather clean and pristine. There's really no deco whatsoever on top of it. I guess they could have also used a different color, respectively, for He-Man and the Masters, and Skeletor and his group. They could have color coordinated each one of those classes. Instead, they kind of kept the bases all to black. And again, it looks fine for what it is. It's just a really small stand. I mean, if you look at the footprint stance of Skeletor, and then you look at the display stand, when you put the figure on top of the stand, it really doesn't give you much clearance at all. Like I said, other than just putting him in a museum pose, it doesn't really give you much clearance other than that to put him in any more dynamic poses. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the figure's accessories, and of course we'll delve deep into looking at the details on Skeletor. He's really impressive. But I want to look at this one first. This gets all those feels inside. Probably looks familiar, doesn't it? Name doesn't quite ring a bell? No? Around Christmas time, you probably would recognize this character if you watch this special every single year. Yeah, you know where I'm going. This is Relay from the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. The fact that we would even get ourselves a little rendition, not so little really when you look at the size of it, but the fact that we actually do get ourselves a little Relay, quite impressive, and I tip my virtual hat to the team over at Mondo for including this. It doesn't have much in the way of posability. I mean, really only left to just the head. You get a ball joint where you can move the head up and down, and full rotation and stuff, all that good stuff going along with it being a ball joint. I thought actually you could move the ears on Relay, not so much, but what you do get as a trade-off to that is a really fantastic detailed recreation of Relay from the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special, right down to those cute little puppy dog eyes, robotic puppy dog eyes looking right back at you. What a nice little release. I love the fact that they would even include this. As far as I know, the Mondo exclusive of Skeletor is going to basically get all the stuff that you're seeing right here. This happens just to be the regular release, but the Cosmic Key is also something that's going to come included with Skeletor. This just so happens to be the regular standard release. So I'm actually impressed that we would get characters like Relay. The fact that we would get as many weapons as we do, all in the standard release. Let's have a look at the rest of those right now. Looking at the figure's weapons, Skeletor comes included with his bone sword. carryover of color seems rather consistent with all of these weapons that he's going to be wielding. His bone sword, though, is not as impressive, I would admit, as his power sword. I feel so more drawn to the power sword myself. But the fact he would come include with his bone sword is really quite impressive. You can see how it looks like it's been forged by hand and hammer. You can see like all these little indentations and stuff on the actual blade. The hilt itself has been wrapped in purple, of course identifying who is the owner of said sword. The bone work is even also nicely crafted here, done in a more cream color. You can see there's slight discolorations to it, maybe perhaps where the paint hasn't completely finished, or for the fact that they probably did that intentionally, so it looks like it's got a little bit more kind of wear and tear to it. Again, it's a neat looking sword. It's not one of which I'd probably be displaying with the figure, but the option certainly is there, as yes, you do have a lot to really choose from. We're going to leave this for last, because I certainly want to focus my efforts and talk a little bit about the Havoc staff. The Havoc staff is so cool. The next thing we're going to have a look at, though, is he comes included with a battle axe, similar to what He-Man would actually sport. This one has a large pearl-like shaped orb on top of it. And as you can see, it's been painted in a not quite gunmetal gray. I mean, it looks, at face glance, it kind of looks like it's gunmetal gray, but slightly tilted to the light. I feel like there's a slight purplish tint done to it. You can see where it's been riveted in place and again wrapped itself, not quite in the more familiar purple colors, but it seems more like a darker gray color scheme instead. Again, all of the weapons can be wielded in his hands. We'll look at all the hand options, all these certainly various different hands that Skeletor does come included with, but there's a whole lot more weapons to still have a look at. Next thing we'll have a look at is the power sword. Now I've kept it inside Skeletor's sheath, because I wanted to draw it in front of you guys. Just pull the sword out of the sheath. What an impressive looking blade. And we'll just put that down for a second. I know I teased you by showing you that. Don't worry, we'll get back to that in a second. Skeletor has this large sheath that's going to clip onto his back. Now when you do get this out of the packaging, these little fastened clips are folded in. And you may not think there's enough clearance when you attach it to the back straps of the figure's torso. Just rest assured that you can bring these out and to kind of assist and get those in place. And then you can always shift the actual sheath back in place. The sheath itself, again, been wrapped in purple, sort of dry brushed on top of an otherwise dark plastic sheath. And you can see the edge, bottom section here, kind of looks again like it's been forged out, similar to the bone sword. A nice little added touch is the fact that they actually included this little fur trim along the top here. It's interesting when you take the sword and you slide it into the sheath. It actually has, I don't know if it's just the air, but when you push into it, it feels like it's going into like a vacuum, almost like it's sucking itself in, if that makes any sense. I think it's just because it's so close, like there's very close quarters, the sheath that is wrapped around the actual blade of the sword. But when you pull it out, you do feel like there is like a little bit of a catch to it. I thought it was actually a magnet, but that would make no sense whatsoever. Just that's what the inside of it looks like. So we'll put that down. Of course, we'll look at the power sword. Skeletor gets only one of these. Certainly a fan nod would have been great to include halved versions of these for both He-Man and Skeletor, where you could, in theory, have attached the two, maybe by a magnet. But instead, what they do give you is one standalone sword, and I'm fine for that. The sword isn't all purple, granted, no. I mean, as you can see, the hilt bottom, the actual handled hilt, is done wrapped in the same familiar, again, colors of those grays, and the silver in the actual top, well, this part of the sword section itself. It's only really here when you look at the actual blade that it gets a little bit of a treatment of purple. It's so subtle, though. It's enough that you look at it and you know you're looking at purple, but it doesn't sacrifice the realistic look to the sword. Like, as you can see from a distance, you can kind of quite make out there's a little bit of a purple tint to the blade. A nice little touch as well is to include the ram skull there along the top, and it's been very nicely painted. Though small, yes, it's one of the smallest details on the pieces of all the pieces that you're getting. But the fact that they would put as much care and detail into this as they do with everything else is again a testament to the kind of stuff that Mondo is producing over there. Leaving what I feel to be one of the best accessories around for Skeletor, let's have a look at his Havoc staff. The Havoc staff looks like it did in the cartoon, and certainly looks like it did included with the figure, but of course it's been upgraded and given a more realistic look to it. If you spin it around, you can see the amount of care, paint, and detailing that they put into this. Like the actual ram skull is really cool looking. You can see all the little imperfections done to the bone, even like the little teeth on the bottom section, because of course this would be the top of the jaw, this jaw section right here. And they've even put in a couple of teeth. They're not completely perfect and symmetrical on both sides. It's got one tooth missing on the one side, and further over there's another tooth missing on the other side. The actual horns themselves have been painted in blue, a nice pastel blue. In a way, I kind of would have hoped that they would have followed suit, perhaps, and given us the same color as this. Just because, again, like, while I know there's other things about the staff are that same pastel blue, it would have certainly been a nice treat to see this sort of color make its way into the horns instead. But that's just my own personal preference. Just some fantastic detailing done to the sculpt and surface here. As we just move our way down, you can see it's been wrapped off, again, taped off sections in the middle area there, all the way down to almost a flat diamond bottom to it. It's very heavy, I have to admit. Skeletor, you probably could pull off the pose of having him point the staff out, but it is going to add some much needed weight to basically to all his joints. At the end of the day, I think I'm probably just going to have the staff standing next to him. But again, I think you could pull off that look. You're just going to not want to keep that for very long because the joints are going to be adding a lot of additional stress to them by the fact that this piece right here, the top part of the Havoc staff, is as heavy as it is. I think you're going to be causing some unnecessary additional stress, like I said, to the joints of Skeletor by keeping permanent poses of him pointing the staff outward. Before we resume with the rest of Skeletor's accessories, I just want to show you guys how to attach the sheath to the back of his torso. Simply just take the figure, spin it around, and you'll see how the strapping X marks the spot the two meet one another. You're basically want to put it on the furthest one out, just because you'll just have the most sticking out, obviously. Now, because these hinge out, it's quite easily just possible to fit this. Let me just twist this back around here. Just fit that underneath the bottom strap, like so. There we go. And then once that's in place, take the top one. You don't have to go the bottom to the top. I just found it was a lot easier to do it that way. And then that just fits over top like that. And it fits quite easily in place. With that, now you can go ahead and grab the power sword. There it is right there. And you can slide that. Oh, how satisfying is that? You can slide the sword all the way down, and you've got that now on the back of Skeletor. Now, obviously, you can bring this a little bit further down. It'll give you just enough clearance that you can fit it to about this point right here. And again, when you just bring that down, just tucking it underneath like that, you've got yourself Skeletor with his power sword. Now, you don't, again, have to have it necessarily on an angle. You could have it more straight if you wanted to. I personally kind of like it more so on an angle, but that's just me. Okay, so let's talk hands. No, not my hands. The hands that come included with the 6-scale release of Skeletor. He comes with a total of 3 pairs, or 9 hands in total. Very good. The hands currently in the sockets of his forearms are kind of pretty boring. They're closed fists. I don't know, I personally would not go closed fists on this particular release of Skeletor, but if that's what you fancy, by all means, he comes with a pair of those. But let's say you want to display him with holding weapons instead. Now we're talking. Skeletor comes included with a pair of gripping hands. Right down to the finest details of the shiny gloss black that they use for the fingernails, Skeletor's hands do look quite good. Needing a manicure, yes, sure, but the hands themselves look decent enough. I might also say I really like the fact that they use broad ball joint pegs, not using very thin pegs. Changing hands out couldn't be any bit simpler. I'll show you guys that in a second as well. Skeletor also comes with a pair of dynamic hands. At the very least, if you aren't going to conquer Eternia, the best thing you can really do is just threaten the citizens of it and then be defeated at the very end by the hands of He-Man. But these hands are really neat, just for, again, threatening spell-casting hands, or just sort of telling He-Man, you'll be back, you'll be back. The hands themselves, as you can see, are really nicely detailed. I mean, sometimes you overlook small things like hands to really find appreciation in them. The wrinkles on the knuckles, the vein work that's done on the tops of the hands, really, again, fantastic looking pieces. To change out those hands couldn't be any bit simpler. You're just going to grab the forearm of Skeletor, whatever hand you decide to go with, pop that out. See how told you how easy that was. And let's replace it with a hand. Weapon holding hand. Just peg that in place like that. The only thing, of course, missing from this equation is to probably get ourselves a weapon of choice. I'm going to go for the time being with the power sword, because I do like the look of the power sword. And you can also pry the fingers away to help assist get the sword into his hand. The only thing I had a little bit more of a difficult time him wielding were the broader handled weapons, like the battle axe and the Havoc staff, just because they were a little bit broader. What I would probably suggest in a case like that, because of course you do want to display those figures, this figure with those accessories, is probably be a good idea to wedge the hand open first, pry the hand open first, then fit something like the Havoc staff inside the hand, and then once that's in place, peg it into the socket of the forearm. Again, my only concern is the staff does feel very heavy. I mean, the swords and stuff aren't so much the issue, but the staff being able to point that out directly, I probably wouldn't be displaying it like that. Like I said, I'll just probably be displaying Skeletor with the staff alongside him like this. This is a pretty neat accessory as well. Skeletor comes included with a reversible cape. In other words, ergo, you can flip this around if you want to have an outside black cape, or if you want to have the interior be black, you can have Skeletor draping a purple cape instead. It's got a real chain that is sewn on both sides, and it's simply just a case of taking the figure, you probably already know where this is going, flattening out the feet so he's not going to go anywhere, and then we're just going to very carefully drape this around his neck, just like that. Now obviously you can tailor this to your desired look. Again, you can either go the route of a purple cape, or you can flip that frown upside down. You could just have it black instead as well. Let me show you what the black cape looks like. Just again, take that over his head. It's not really too much that you have to fuss and muss about. It's just simply a case of dropping the chain around the front of his head. And again, we'll just take the black side of the cape, face that out with the purple interior. You know, I kind of actually, in a way, dig the purple interior. It kind of goes consistently with the fact that the rest of Skeletor's colors aren't quite this purple to start off with, so it's a little bit more jarring, I find. I kind of like, again, having the black on the outside instead. I'm not likely going to be displaying Skeletor with a cape anyways, but I appreciate the fact that Mondo would include such an accessory. But by far, probably one of the neatest accessories that come included with the figure is a classic head portrait of Skeletor as he would look in the original Masters of the Universe toy line. This is fantastic, the fact that you would include this. I'm more rooted in the reality of displaying him with the defaulted head portrait, but the very least that they would include something like this is really neat, I have to admit. Very classic in the way that they've done this, right down to the fact that he's got the red eyes on the interior sockets and the green along the top and along the bottom of his jawline. It's, again, really cool that they would include something like this. To change out the head, we're just going to grab the figure like so, pop the head off the ball joint, just as easy as that, and then just replace it with the head that you want to use. And again, you only have two heads to choose from. We'll just pop that in place. I do notice, though, that the ball socket, the interior socket section, doesn't seem as open, doesn't seem as large as the other one. So I'm probably going to have to maybe heat that up or see if I can widen that just a little bit. It's almost like it's just exactly the same size as the ball joint, sort of causing me to have some more difficulty. Again, you can apply a lot of pressure to it to eventually get the head place in place. And that's what the Skeletor looks like. And that's what the original looks like, the defaulted one. Now, personally speaking, I like this one a lot, but the fact that they would include an alternate head portrait, you gotta admit, is pretty neat. Now, obviously, if you guys are looking to pick up this one for yourself, you guys want to see some close-up looks at the head portrait and some of the cool details that Mondo incorporated into this figure, so I'm more than happy to oblige. Here's a close-up look at what the Skeletor defaulted head portrait looks like, an exquisite-looking sculpt. The eyes are, as you can see, they're red on the interior. I wondered how that would have looked if it was all black. Perhaps it would have been too absent. The face is, of course, a nice mustard yellow. The mouth does open and close slightly, not too much though. So you want to be careful that you don't put too much wear and tear on that. But it moves just a little bit so you can utter the words, "I'll get you, He-Man. I'll get you." Really nice looking sculpting, not only on the jaw lines, above and below there. You can see very nice looking indentations to the bone, also on his cheeks as well. Now, none of this figure really has fabric to him. One of the things, of course, with 6-scale figures is they often feel compelled to go the route of fabric. Mondo instead went all plastic, and I think it's a safer and smarter bet long run. You definitely can convey more of the sculpting in plastic than just relying sometimes on the natural look of fabric, especially when it comes to the hood. The hood, I don't think you could have pulled this look off as good in fabric. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some instances where it actually feel the opposite. Fabric has a natural drape to it. I've mentioned that in a couple of reviews in the past. But I think in the case of a hood for Skeletor, getting the natural folds, getting that little point on the back there, I think it would have looked a little too much having that all in fabric. Getting that done in plastic, I think definitely works a little bit better. I'm really happy though with how the head portrait was overall finished and completed here. It looks exactly like I would imagine Skeletor to look like. No, by the way, if you are wondering, the hood is not removable. It's completely sculpted in place. I really like the side profile of Skeletor here. You can really see how well that looks from both sides. The thing kind of like the toy, the smaller original Masters line, is that with Skeletor's head portrait, the hood isn't part of this piece right here. I'm a bit, in a way, kind of conflicted and torn. On one way, I like the fact that this is a more larger scale of the original Masters line, something that I grew up with. On the other end of it, I wondered if they had continued the purple up from this point on, it would have definitely made it look a little bit more finished. So again, I feel personally that I'm jumping between two different opinions. On the one way, I do kind of like that it, like the original toy line, you do have the disconnect. You do see the neck, the bare neck, being a separate piece from the actual armor plating that he has on his shoulders. But on the other end of it, I can't help but wonder how that would have looked if that was just a continuation of the purple that went all the way up into his hood. Let me know what you guys would have preferred down below. As for the slight bit of armor, Skeletor doesn't have a whole lot of it. He does have the little bat crescent on the front there, and the ruby gemstone featured among a sort of skull and crossbones. He is, of course, the skull. These are the crossbones. You ever realized that? The coloring is the exact same as his bone sword. I like that it's still consistently coloring everything together. The purple on the little flaps here are more of a softer plastic. So when it certainly comes to moving his arms out, you're not going to worry that these are in the way of things. Then he's got his loincloth with a continuation of the ram skull. And then you've got the skirt flapping on the front, and that also is a continuation on the back. If you flip it up slightly, you're rewarded to a kind of a vintage look for many of the Masters figures. That very familiar looking belt that made its way through many of the Masters figures. I really like the fact that they would put that underneath that, and still made it so that you can move the skirt up and down and kind of cover it completely, really, if you wanted to, just like the original toy. Continuing down, we've got the foot or calf guards, and they're done also in that same color scheme of gray and purple, with little rivet points there on either side. The neat thing about this particular figure, and I'm almost even going completely past it, is the fact that they've added this really neat airbrushing to areas around his muscles. So his abdomens, for example, his biceps, his shoulders, for example, have all this nice additional darker blue, almost borderlining purple airbrushing. In fact, actually, even Skeletor's neck gets a little bit of that as well. So it's not all just simply a blue figure. They put a whole lot of extra care and detail to like little airbrushed areas here. Again, really making a lot of those details pop. It reminded me, actually, when I was looking at Skeletor's thighs, how you get still that same treatment. I've got this one little bit of paint. I don't know what it actually came from. Don't think it actually came from the skirt. But I've got a little bit of paint, just a little mishap that happened right there. Luckily, the skirt's going to cover most of that, so I'm not really going to see it anyways, but just a really neat sculpted figure, right down to the fact that Skeletor does have his feet. Now, the feet aren't completely flat. Now, I don't have a figure issue with displaying this guy on his flat footing, that is. His ankles seem to be holding quite well. I don't think necessarily that this figure needed to have flat feet. He seems to pull off just as much the strong stance as he would if he had completely flat feet. Of course, if you have issues getting this figure to stand properly, you can always most definitely make use of the display stand that, of course, comes included with the figure. Having a look at Skeletor's articulation, his head rotates almost all the way around. I mean, you can still pull it off, but there's just this little bottom section of his hood that wants to get caught sometimes when you're rotating his head around. The head moves up, the head moves down, and you can also rock it back and forth. I had mentioned that he does have a little bit of articulation in his mouth, not much. I mean, to the extreme that is one look, and that's the other look. So again, like, you can't really open and close it too much. The upper torso is on a very generous ball joint. You can move that all the way around, and it doesn't seem like I'm worried that the cross strapping here on his torso armor is going to get in the way of things. It seems like it's just in the right place that you can move his torso quite easily, actually, all the way around. And Skeletor has a secondary ball joint right at the base where it connects to the waist section. The arms hinge outward at about a 90-degree angle. You can move the arm forward and back. He has a swivel at the bicep. He has only a single hinge in the elbow, which for a figure this size, I don't really need a double hinge in the elbow. I think single hinges will work perfectly fine. I mean, really, to what extreme are you going to be displaying it? This isn't, of course, He-Man, but if you want to have him in that epic pose like He-Man would, you can still pull that off with a single elbow bend. I don't think it necessarily needed two. The hands rotate all the way around, depending on whatever hand you decide you want to display the figure with. The legs split out to just shy of a full splits. Skeletor can't really pull off the splits that I would imagine anyways. The legs move forward, the legs move back. He has a swivel on the top cut of the thigh, basically where it attaches that ball joint. He has, in this case, though, a double hinge on the knee. And I find the hinges are a bit on the tight side, but I'm perfectly fine for tight joints rather than loose joints. He has double hinge joints in the knee, and then Skeletor has a good generous ball joint, it looks, in the feet as well, performing an ankle pivot, and you can move the feet up and down. I really like this figure a lot. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to grab the He-Man, but again, thanks to the folks over at Mondo Tees, we were able to have a look at Skeletor, which again is a really nice representation of Skeletor. The fact that we even get ourselves a relay. We got ourselves a relay that came included with the figure. He does have, of course, the deluxe version, the exclusive version of this guy that's also going to come with the Cosmic Key. I don't really think for all the stuff that he comes included with that Skeletor needs above and beyond all of that to get a Cosmic Key. You certainly want to get him with the Cosmic Key. You can get yourself the exclusive version. But I think for everything that he has basically all the perfect traits of Skeletor, a larger representation of the original Skeletor toy that I had as a kid. In final looks, I wanted to show you guys the Skeletor does have the necessary means of being displayed with the Havoc staff pointed extended straight out, kind of like he does in the classic cartoon series. I will say, though, this adds a lot of stress to the arms and to the legs, so I probably wouldn't advise displaying him long-term looking like this, but it was just simply here to show you that it is possible if you wanted to pull off this look. Thank goodness he does come with a display stand, which is one talking point I did want to mention. The display stand is fine and good for displaying him in a museum pose, but if you want to get him into more extreme dynamic pose, I think Mondo probably should have included a larger stand. Something that could have accommodated a wider stance on Skeletor, and maybe the clip that supports the figure probably should have had a more profound curve to it, so it really held the figure in place. Other than that, all from head to toe, I couldn't have asked for a better looking Skeletor. The fact that he does come included with a classic head portrait, how cool is that? The Havoc staff, 2 different swords, and his battle axe. Oh my, he comes with a whole lot of cool stuff going on. He's definitely worth picking up if you're a big fan of the Masters of the Universe line, and certainly some of the stuff that Mondo is producing right now. Now, I didn't get my chance to get the He-Man, but how cool Skeletor has turned out, I definitely will be sourcing out a He-Man to go along with my Skeletor on display. Mondo is also slated to release a whole bunch of other Mondo Masters line. I think we're also getting ourselves a Man-at-Arms, if I'm not mistaken, because I've seen images of him surface online, and he's looking really good as well. There's definitely a bright future for Masters of the Universe fans. Certainly looking to collect it outside the realm of the smaller scale, which sort of has always confined the Masters for the longest of times. It was either the smallest crouch, you know, those wrestling poses that they were in the original line, and some of the stuff that the Masters of the Universe classic figures have been pulling off. This is now a branch out into something of the 6 scale variety. And like I said, based on what I'm seeing here with Skeletor, I think it's in very good hands with Mondo. Did you manage to pick up this one for yourself? Let me know down below in the comments section, or based on this review and this review alone, what do you guys think of the Mondo Masters of the Universe Skeletor 6 scale figure? Also, if you guys are new to this channel or longtime viewers never got around to it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification and keep your peepers peeled, because there's going to be a whole lot of videos coming your way. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.